Hey everyone, welcome to another edition or another episode of Social Selling for Newbies. I am Brandon Lee, and I am joined today by Tom Burton.
And we are pseudo live.
We are pseudo live. Yeah.
Right.
So if you're watching this on LinkedIn, hey, we're not really here. Like, the wonderful magic of technology. We pre recorded this, but we're able to run it live. And if you're on the podcast, well, we're never live for you anyway.
Right.
So what's the difference? But what we're doing, because this is going to record on December 28th. And we're gonna, like most of you, we'll take the week off and be with our families and all that fun stuff. So we wanted to record and do a best of, but instead of just press and play on a best of, Tom and I wanted to chat a little bit about what we've learned with social selling for newbies in the past 14 episodes and what we're excited about for 2023. And then we'll press the play button on social selling by the numbers, which we think is one of our favorite episodes because it really talks about the value, the true data of social selling. So Tom, what do you think we should how should we kick this thing off? What have you learned in the last 14 episodes?
Well, yeah, I've certainly learned that this whole area of social selling has a lot of different, I guess, confusion associated with it.
Yeah.
Hence why you wear your social selling suck shirt every now and then.
Yeah.
Um, on the other hand, it's, whether you call it social selling, virtual selling, digital selling, LinkedIn selling, whatever you end up calling it,
Yeah.
it's and again, we'll talk about in the replay of the by the numbers, you'll hear some of the numbers, but it's becoming more and more, if done properly, an effective way of selling, maybe the most effective way of selling. I will go on a limb and say, I believe it is probably the most effective way of selling in this day and age, as it relates to when we say selling, building relationships, building connections, I mean, all about selling, right, is getting companies to have conversations with you and be
Yeah.
willing to learn a little bit about what you do and how you do it. And so I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of confusion, but a lot of potential.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, for everybody, I think the gurus that have been out there over the last 5, 6 years that have really positioned social as some sort of a magic bullet, right? Hey, give us access to your LinkedIn account, and we're going to fill your pipeline full of ready to go customers and conversations. I mean, how many of you out there just kind of rolled your eyes and laughed as I said that? But I think because there were people out there, and I mean, you can really get into the dynamics of this. You had this big push in the last decade around online experts selling their wares. And then you had a bunch of people that weren't really experts, but saw an opportunity to put a program or a course together and start selling it. And then you had a bunch of people out there training people how to create marketing messaging. And really, it was just a lot of fabrication, to be honest. I mean, not to call people liars, but they put together great courses and had great messaging. And the only ones that really won was themselves because their customers really didn't have the experiences that they were told. And so, look, social isn't a silver bullet. In fact, part of the reason I've said social selling sucks is I don't like the term social because of what comes up with it. And the reality is it's not that social media is, this magic tool. It's a tool. And when done with a strategy, with skill, done consistently, it becomes a great tool that adds to any salesperson's goals. And I'll say one last thing, Tom, I'll hand it off to you. When Tom and I, we took, my old digital influence show and we were going to create a new show, and Tom and Carson and I were going to partner together. Tom came to me with the term social selling for newbies, and I was against it. I didn't want the term social selling anymore. And really the main reason we stuck with social selling, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, is from an SEO perspective, that's the term that people are using. But
Yeah,
it's
people
also
are
a term that
searching
a lot
for
of
it.
people hate.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely controversial, I guess,
Yeah.
and or can be controversial. But yeah, there was a lot of, in the research we did, there's a lot of searches and interest in the area of social selling, quote unquote. But really, and it is using social as a tool, but it's also using other digital channels as a tool. But yeah, that's what I mean. A lot of the confusion, and I'm hoping that we're helping to unconfuse some of this.
Yeah.
But I guess as the confusion has mounted, the potential has increased at the same time.
Yeah.
And again, if done effectively, and Carson and some of his stories certainly is a testament to that, and some of the other people we've had as guests are testament to it. And so it definitely can work and does work very effectively when done correctly.
Yeah. And I would like to leave everyone with this is when we talk about social, we talk about incorporating the channel of social in a strategic plan that's part of your sales process. It could be part of the research side of identifying who your customers are. It can be part of your prospecting side of creating those first conversations. And it could be part of the sales and closing side because social gives us that one-to-many opportunity to really influence individuals and teams of individuals that are on the other end of your sales experience. This does not mean we are against the phone. It does not mean that we are against email, and this does not mean that we're against anything face to face. But what you'll find in this episode that we're talking about in social selling by the numbers is that when you incorporate social, it greatly enhances and accelerates all of your other stages of the sales process and all your other activities. And here's the last, this was a really good, highly engaged post I did a few weeks ago. Our reputation precedes us, right? And you either have no reputation, which means when you send that email or you leave a call, a voicemail, if you have no reputation, you're just one of many people in the sea of sameness. You're just another person vying for my time. But when you have a social presence and you're thriving in social and you're commenting and people see you and they know your name and you have that reputation that precedes you, when you leave those voicemails or you send those emails, there's that aha moment of, wait a minute, why do I know this person? Or I do know this person. Oh, that's the guy or the woman from LinkedIn. And that, my friends, I think really speaks to what Carson preaches all the time, which is increase your probability of a successful outcome. And that's why I think social is so stinking important.
Completely agree. Maybe that is the keynote as we look into next year, and why the numbers, so we'll talk about in the episode, makes sense, right? Is all of us want to increase the probability and the frequency of the conversation, of the relevant conversations we're having, right? That's all you're really doing in sales at the end of the day, is having relevant communication and conversation that ideally will lead to some form of a business transaction, right? Well, we all want to do more of that. We want to increase the probability of having those relevant conversations. This helps enable that. Much more so, again, done right. Done wrong can actually set you backwards, but done right,
Pitch
and
slaps.
and and that's what you'll hear on the numbers. Some of these numbers here are amazing in terms of just the people that are willing to have conversations on social versus the phone, or versus email, or some of the other things. So again, if done, with healthy connections and healthy relationships and healthy conversations, the probability can go way up. And that's really maybe all at the end of the day we're talking about, is how to use, these techniques to get better results.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So everyone, hey, thank you so much for your support of social selling for newbies. And as we're going to press play on the social selling by the number show, obviously we won't be available for comments or questions, but we'll come back after the fact. And anybody that wants to be more involved, we have our social selling HQ.com that you're more than welcome to come be a part of. It's a free community of people that are like us. We're learning, we're sharing what we know, what we've learned, the mistakes that we've made. And then, of course, our podcast, which is social selling for newbies. And we'd appreciate any support, subscriptions, promoting, sharing, reviews would be very, very beneficial for us as we move into 2023. If you're so inclined to do so, we'd appreciate it.
all right, let's press play on social selling by the numbers.
Sounds great. Enjoy, everyone.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the Social Selling for Newbies podcast. Carson, Brandon, good afternoon.
Tom, good to see you.
Great to have everyone here again. And, I wanted to give a special welcome and shout out, not only to our live viewers, but to our podcast listeners, right? So our second episode just dropped today on all the different podcast areas, and this will be dropping the following week going forward. So if you're listening on the podcast, would definitely like to welcome you as well. And I'd like to welcome Rob from sunny Northern California. I'm in sort of Central California, and it's sort of sunny here. So we were going to talk today about social selling by the numbers. And Carson, you'll be very excited and thrilled to hear that I watched Moneyball again this last weekend.
Love it.
Love that movie.
Yeah. It's a good thing my wife likes it. And one of the things, though, that really hit me, I think maybe more this time than when I've watched it previously is, obviously the situation there, right, with the Oakland A's and the baseball team there is Billy Beane, he had to do a lot. He had to do more with less, right? He had way less money than the big teams. He had way less. And so he had to figure out how to use data and probabilities to do a lot more with less. And in this world right now, right, we're all being asked to do more with less. And it seemed like, wow, this is very apropos to what we're talking about today and the whole social selling about, how do we use probabilities and numbers and just smartly go about things so we can get a lot more accomplished with less. So that's what we're going to jump on today.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, I mean, that movie is, I'm not a baseball fan. I'm really not, even though I am going to the Braves game when we're done, but I'm not a big baseball fan. But so a lot of people may not watch that movie if they're not baseball fans. But if you take away the sport itself element, it's exactly what you're saying. It was all about the data, and they did incredible things just by looking at data to a point. They brought in a statistics geek that knew nothing about baseball. Well, he never played, I guess, is the way to say it. And it's totally applicable to social, because so often, and Carson, speak into this too, I hear when it comes to social selling, we don't have the data to our personal profiles like marketers get the data on business pages. But there is data that we can get. And when we follow the data, that's where the money is.
Yeah, there's really two lenses that I typically look at this from. And I love that you call out this film, Tom. I know when you and I first started talking months ago, this was an area where we found some synergies right off, a mutual admiration for this film. And what's hilarious is I'll do searches for sales movies. And I think it's funny that Moneyball shows up on this list, because I wouldn't think of it as a typical sales movie. I think right. Glenn Ross, Wall Street, Boiler Room, Wolf of Wall Street, but Moneyball is a lot of times on these lists. And I think it's fascinating when we apply this to social selling. So I've given a lot of presentations on social selling. And as I've shared on this podcast before, I started doing this when it was kind of an anomaly, especially in a big company where nobody else was doing it at all. And so there's this one lens where it's social selling statistics. You can find these online, do a quick search of like social selling stats, but over 3 billion people use social media. 78% of sellers using social selling outsell their peers. 76% of buyers are ready to have a social media conversation. And social sellers are 51% more likely to achieve sales quotas. So that's one element of the stat.
Whoa. You got to go through those again, but go ahead. Keep going. That was awful fast. Amazing data.
I'll put this as a slide in the notes. But the other lens is, I grew up in a call center, right? So when I was calling, we would have to do stick. This was funny because now everything is done so technologically advanced, but, we would do stick tallies of dials. And, it was all about at bats and, trying to make calls to get customer prospects on the line. And so what's fascinating to me is I've applied a Moneyball approach to my social selling, as in I know that if I reach out to 100 people, I can get 45, 50, 60 LinkedIn connections. I can get 10, 15, 20 meetings, depending on the verbiage that's used. So I love how you can apply data not only to sell yourself on why social selling, but you can also use it as you tangibly track the success or lack thereof of your social selling process.
Yeah, completely. And can you read those stats one more time? Those were pretty remarkable.
Yeah, so 3.2 billion people are on social media. We've talked obviously
Right.
about a lot of the different mediums that we
Right.
use. And so when you think about your audience, your problem is you don't have a relationship with those people. Well, guess what? They're out on social media somewhere, most likely. 78% of sellers using social selling outsell their peers. So people that are using these tools and these tactics, they're usually better than average, right? 76% of buyers are ready to have a social media conversation with potential providers. Social sellers are 51% more likely to achieve sales quotas. And there's several others. I actually found these doing a quick search. It's on Opt-in Monster is who these stats are quoted from. But 84% of C-level executives use social media to make purchasing choices or are influenced by social media. So everything that we've talked about, it's where our target audience is. They're already out there. They're getting information. And then it can enable us to broker conversations that we never would have had otherwise because that's where they are.
That's really good.
The really one that bounces out, and Brandon, this is where I want to jump in some of your stats that I know you have, is this, what is it, 76% you said, Carson, that is willing to have a conversation on social? I mean,
correct.
how many, I wonder what that number would be. I mean, how many people are willing to have a phone call from a salesperson and have a sale? Probably not that high.
Not as many.
Not anywhere near that. And even I would bet an email conversation would be much less than that, go back and forth on email. That's a really interesting, and Brandon, I think that ties into some of the numbers you've been seeing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think a couple things. I want to back up a little bit if you don't mind, and then I'll
Sure.
get to my data. Don't let me get sidetracked. But Carson, what you said was interesting because you talked about, we think about traditional sales movies, right? Boiler Room and Wolf of Wall Street. That sales style isn't effective anymore.
You're right.
Right? The call center, the pounding the phones, the boiler rooms, it's just not an effective style anymore because buyers have changed. Tom and I, we were talking earlier today, and we were saying the buyer journey has changed, and a lot of buyers are doing, and I'm an air quote for podcast, research before they even know they're doing research now, right? Because of their activity in social media, what they see in the news feed, what they see in shows, what they're listening to, helps them start seeing opportunities for change or things. They're like, you know what, we have that problem. That's really the organic beginning of their research. And as sellers, if we're not doing that type of content, we're not active in our own social posting, we're not active in commenting with prospective customers and the industry, then they never get a chance to see us. Our only opportunity to capture their attention goes back to calls and emails. In the very beginning of this, we just all shook our head and agreed that type of outreach isn't as effective as it used to be. But when you combine your social presence, and you can call it a personal brand, you can call it your social activity, whatever you want. But when you have that and calls, you have that and emails, now all of a sudden your cold calls are really more warmer calls. Is that fair to say, Carson? Because they've seen you inside of your social activity.
I love that you said that, Brandon, because you're spot on. When we talk about data, it's laden into multiple areas, right? Because your highest probability is a warm handoff. I have a relationship with somebody that's in the C-suite, and they introduce me to someone else in the C-suite. That has about as close to 100% probability as possible. However, it's not often, or it's not always for sure, that we have that capability to just walk right into the C-suite. So we know that they're out on social. So this gives us a higher probability to connect. Now, I, like many, I may send 1, 2, 5, 10 C-suite, C-level introduction requests and go for the room. I think that's happened to a lot of us, trying to create relationships and other lines of business. But where I get a higher probability is if instead of just reaching out to that C level, I reach out to other influencers of those influencers, VPs, directors, so that it does two things. One, I'm getting intel, I'm doing social listening, I'm gaining perspective that I can share with those executives as I reach out to them. Hey, I'm hearing from your teams, this is an issue. We've got some scenarios where we've solved this for companies, would love to talk to you, would love to get your perspective. My quality of messaging is higher, so my probability is higher. But also, I've swarmed those influencers. I've kind of created a groundswell. We've talked about that in prior calls as well. I saw a comment from Rob in the chat. Do I track connection requests on LinkedIn? And if so, what do you see as far as patterns in your acceptance percentage? Love the question, Rob, because here's the thing. Yes, absolutely. I think it's important. Anything that you're doing that is a process-oriented piece of your arsenal, I think you should track it. You should make it tangible. I've used some tools before to send first-degree connection requests and personalize them based on organization, based on title, et cetera. But when you're just sending a LinkedIn connection request to somebody, I'd say your odds are probably 20% of getting a connection. If you add some personalization to it, that goes higher. The messaging that I use today gets about a 50% clip when I'm reaching out to customer executives in those organizations. And it's based around, my role, my stake in the game, why I exist, what I'm paid to do relative to their investment. There's a lot of things that you can infuse into that, but all of those things up your probability. And that's the key of data here.
Yeah. And I think with that too, there's a lot of variables there for people that are listening. And what I love about being on the show with you, Carson, is you've got the enterprise, you've got Microsoft behind you. And I think there's some advantages that you have when you send a connection request and you're from Microsoft that some people in smaller companies may not have. And other times it works against you, I'm sure. But we got to take advantage of all the variables that we can. And the other variables you have is this show and your Salesman on Fire show, the amount of content that you create, the amount of commenting that you do inside your industry. This isn't like, I love Rob's question, but I want to just caution, this isn't just I send connection request. It's I send connection requests layered on top of your total social profile, your social activity, I guess. And it's that layering of those variables that amplifies your success. It's, as Tom likes to say, 1 + 1 = 3, because we're layering activities on top of each other.
Would you say, Carson, with the 50% that you were talking about there, and I think, Brandon, this is what you're referring to, is that, your batting average, right, is 50%, because a couple things. One is you've already established relationships possibly with other people in that organization. So that raises your probability of getting a base hit, right, on the thing that's there. It could be like what you're saying, Brandon, because, hey, they check you out, right? What do you get a check? You check them out on LinkedIn. Are they legitimate? Are they, oh, wow, Carson's commenting a lot. He's all over. Yeah, I want to be associated with him. Why wouldn't I want to? So I think there's a lot of things that raise, because a total newbie, going back to, right, if this started to go out and randomly send out connection requests, I don't know, that batting average might be what, 100, 10% or 5% versus 50%. I mean, it comes from the work that goes in there.
Yeah.
Carson, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, there's so many variables. I mean, that's an astute observation. It's and I think the wording that I've used has changed over time. It's very counterintuitive based on the responses that I was getting at first. Brandon, you made a great point earlier. There's some good and maybe some neutral in reaching out as part of a big company. Some people want to talk to you, some people don't. But I used the feedback that I was getting from those who didn't want to, and I infused that into what I was sending to executives, and that just upped the batting average.
Yeah. And you do a really good job of making your social activity human. And I think that is a layer of those variables that we're talking about, that you're not just some, executive salesperson that's popping out messages to say, will you connect? You're a whole human on social. You're commenting, you're sharing content. You share content that's not just about what you sell. And I think it's those layers that, as newbies, those are the variables that really move the needle, that a lot of times we don't think about, because we go in and we want to hit. We go back to the old school boiler room. How do I hit messages? How do I get in front of the right people? How do I do it repeatedly? Well, the buyer is more sophisticated now. And I would say that the buyers are more sensitive now, and that they don't want to be pounded like that. I don't know if anyone ever wanted to, but when, the phone, and, I'm plugged in right now, so yeah, there actually is a cord. But back when, our phones were all connected to cords, that was really the most efficient way to talk to people. And it's not the most efficient way anymore.
I love that you called out those films too, because when I was much, much, much younger and I watched those films, I just thought they were cool. And now I watch them and I laugh. I think they're hilarious, because I can't believe that there was once a day and age where that was the norm. And again, I said I was in a call center for a long time in my sales career, and I remember vividly, being told it's all about dials. You need 100+ dials a day. I mean, I had people dialing 300-400 times a day in my call center. But guess who sold the most? It's actually somebody who made about 10 calls a day, and they were super high quality. They did needs analysis. They connected authentically. And that's what got the job done. And I've never forgotten that. And I think that's what's so key about the social selling aspect, is that we can use these pathways to create meaningful dialogue and relationships with customers seeking to serve. And that's ultimately what is going to lead to success. There's a lot of people, and I go back, Brandon, to your shirt. There's a lot of people who use these tools the wrong way. With great tools come great responsibility. And so there's always going to be some folks that sully the name. But frankly, if you use these things correctly, you can create amazing relationships that transcend. I've had customers that I've met on LinkedIn that I don't even support anymore, that I still talk to on a regular basis.
Yeah. I love what Rob said too. And my emphasis is always on social prospecting, right? My niche focus is helping people use their social profiles to generate or earn. I like to say it's about earning that first call with their prospects. And Rob, said it here. He believes it's so important to be active in the comments. If you post, and Tom, you and I have talked about this. I think the three of us talked about this before too. We had a show, I think before Newbies, where people were saying, I've been posting for 3 months and I don't have any deals from it. It's like, posting's great, but commenting is interactive. And it's a difference between talking at people versus talking with people. And we need to be able to do both, because when we post, we share our thoughts, our expertise, our experiences. We get to show our human side, and that draws people towards us. But then our commenting is where we have, as Carson says over and over, we have the opportunity to serve. We have the opportunity to add value. And if you're not doing those, I love to call it the social two-step. It's posting and commenting with strategy, not just opening up your news feed and commenting on what's there, but going to specific people, your top 100 prospects, go to their social activity, see what they're commenting on. And I'll get it, right now people go, oh, big problem, my people don't post. That's okay. If they're active in social, meaning they're liking and commenting on anything, then you have the ability to strategically comment to raise awareness of who you are and start building that rapport before you send the connection request. And that's one of the best tactics I've seen that increases the probability of those connection requests getting accepted and converting that into a conversation.
And we're going to talk more on another show here about commenting. We should definitely do a whole show on commenting strategies, because it is such a a probability booster, right? The commenting is a big probability accelerator booster for, getting the connections as well as getting the meetings. Carson, you really got me thinking about how to build sort of a framework from these different variables, right? I've got my Moneyball geek hat on how to take all of these different things that we're seeing that influence that probability of moving the ball down the field and getting those meetings, and then having those meetings not just be a meeting, but lead to something meaningful in the business, right? And it's not luck or happenstance. It's the things that you do to accomplish that. And that's, again, the same as the Moneyball premise, right? Is like, okay, find the right people that do the right things and we'll get the right results. So Brandon, we went off course because you were going to talk about your
Yeah.
stats, and then you went way off course here.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I'll share my data that might be kind of backwards. But what the data we found is that when people are using social as their outreach, not the outreach, but as part of their outreach, and they have, their profiles done well, they're sharing good content around experiences and conversations they're having with customers, and they're commenting on their prospects' social activity, that when they do get the sales opportunity, it's a 30% acceleration in the sales cycle. And just a quick commentary on that number, it's logical too. When we're cold outreaching and somebody says, yes, I'll take a demo or I'll have a conversation, they still may not be in it. Sometimes it's like, hey, I'm gonna take the demo so they stop calling me. And we've talked about it before. It's totally acceptable these days to just ghost a salesperson even after a call. But when you have that social presence and the buyers then agree to a call, a demo, a conversation, whatever it may be, it's a 30% acceleration in the sales process. It doesn't always mean you get a done deal, but even if you get to a no, you've saved 30% of your time instead of chasing, or, nothing worse than sending messages that say, hey, I'm just following up. I mean, if you got to send I'm just following up message, you've probably lost the deal.
Are you saying in the theme of our movies today, are you saying that's a Ghostbuster?
We got it. Was that? Like,
wow. I love that.
I was thinking sports and now we're moving into movies. I got to shift my brain a little bit.
No, but what you are saying, right, is that by using social, your probability of being ghosted or completely blown off reduces.
Yeah.
And so at least you're going to get an answer back rather than a nothing back.
Right. Tom, you've created a new social selling term here today. I just want to throw that out there.
I like it.
I think that maybe that should be our theme song when we start the thing, who are you going to call? No,
right.
Nobody.
Trademark that now.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. And the other data points on it, and this is really around the social prospecting side, where I focus, and as we see, and again, it depends on the individual user and them doing the necessary daily tactics. Like if you're not picking up the phone, old school boiler room, you don't pick up the phone and call people. Well, you're not going to get people on a conversation. But upwards of 80% increases in their conversations with customers as compared to their cold calling and email cadences alone.
Can you repeat that again? That's very meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I see 40 to 80%, and I know that there's a little bit of a gap, a wide range there, but it depends on how serious somebody takes their commenting activities. And we've talked about this before. We publish content. It's like when you think of social media, you think I gotta publish content, but it's publishing content and commenting. And the more you comment, the higher that number goes. And that's getting, in a very strategic, just like your cold calling cadences, except we're doing social activity cadences, and you're getting, 40 to 80% more first conversations with prospects in the same 30-day time period. That's significant. It takes a little bit of activity, but I like what Tom said earlier, or Carson, you said earlier, some of the best producers make 10 or 15 calls a day instead of 100. It's all about the efficiency of our time. And then when it comes to the connection request side, 150% more accepted connection request. And the number I saw with a lot of, my customers tend to be SMB, is it's less than a 10% acceptance rate when they're just sending out their cold connection request. We start doing the social activity, and all of a sudden they're pushing 60, 70% acceptance rates because we're commenting on social activity that our prospects are seeing. We're leveraging LinkedIn's notification system, right? I want to get Carson's attention and he went and commented on something, and I come back and comment after him and do that a couple of times and then send him a connection request. I'm already known before I send the connection request. Probability goes through the roof.
I love that. I mean, it's all about staying top of mind and building a community around what you do. And those have served me very, very well. Trying to find ways to, I love what you called out there, Brandon, because it's all about how do you actively engage and almost like you can stay at the pulse of what matters to these executives that you want to connect with. And whether it's SMB or enterprise, they're out there posting and saying exactly what's on their mind. Shame on us if we're not listening.
Yeah.
I think that's the key element. And here's what I struggle with a lot is that, this show is social selling for newbies. I think a lot of organizations right now are trying to figure out, where does social selling play a part? And they're all trying to, figure out process and do training and things of that nature. Tom, you kind of alluded, I'm a student of this stuff. So I map out a grid and figure out what relationships do we need to get done, what we want to get done this year. Let's go out and create those relationships, create relationships within those lines of business. What are the key conversations and talk tracks that matter in the industry? Let's arm our sellers with that and let's go do. But what's interesting to me is, I've trained this for years in several different countries, and it's like we're still all newbies because we're still all learning. There's new technologies, there's new mediums, and I think it's fascinating to me that we all agree that we should be social selling. Yet I think what we have a big disagreement of, or maybe lack of consensus in so far, is how to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're saying, Carson, it's been an art, right? It's been an art to people like yourselves and others who have figured it out. We want to make it more of a science and make that science, make it so that others can repeat that, right? And again, that goes back to my, the analytics, right? The whole idea was, whether you agree with it or not, he was trying to make the baseball game scientific versus a scout going, hey, I think that guy's got potential, and that kind of stuff. Obviously, there's a balance, as we know. It's not 100% either way, but the more that we can turn the art into a science, make it repeatable, scalable, so more and more people can do it, and then have some of the numbers that the numbers that between the two of you that you just went through are jaw-dropping numbers. When you look at those and you compare them to traditional, what's going on 10 years ago with boiler rooms or whatever, but look at the traditional MQL, outbound SDR, all that kind of stuff that goes on today. Compare that to the numbers you guys just went through. It's like no comparison.
Did you just bring up Jaws? Did you add another movie to this?
We are spanning the pop culture stratosphere.
That's
here
right.
That's right.
From the 70s. Wait till I start talking about Caddyshack.
Well, Ghostbusters from the 80s. Moneyball,
right.
2000s.
90s,
You're all
we covered Jaws was 70s though, I think, right? And Caddyshack was late 70s. We're really dating ourselves. So, boy, we're almost out of time. Boy, these fly.
They do.
So, any final? I definitely want to publish and pull together these stats, because these stats are, and I think some of these we may want to drill down into in more detail on future shows. Brandon, any questions that we didn't get to today that we needed to hear?
No, I did think, in Carson, this would be a good one for you to address. Rob said he had to leave, but he had posted it. It's a crazy number. A high of 90% of people on LinkedIn are lurkers. They're seeing the comments even if they're not posting. Not a question in there, but I think that's something really worth emphasizing is we're all newbies in this. There's a big opportunity there in commenting that a lot of times I think just gets overlooked, because the boiler room concept is message, 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 not engage, engage, engage. And Carson, every episode, please share, provide value, and serve. And that's where commenting comes in.
I love that. No, Brandon, you're right. I think it's interesting to me because I think we can use some of the statistics that we talked about today to sell us on why social selling should be part of our arsenal. But it's going to be a very unique and personalized approach for each of us, depending on who our audience is, where they are, and that approach. You know, what's funny? I always think about, like, Wall Street, Gordon Gekko, I bagged the whale, right? Bud Fox. And, I think we all have that executive that we really want to create their relationship with. I myself have one. And you know what? Every day I've bookmarked this person. I'm following posts. I'm commenting. I've sent messages to this person that basically quote articles that they've been featured in. And I will get that relationship one day. We're connected on LinkedIn, but I've yet to get the meeting. So even I, as a social seller, I'm still trying to create conversations. We've got a lot of synergies with the organization, but always continuing to try to create authentic relationships based on leveraging social. And I like to say, I never discriminate against any path or any means or mechanism that's viable to create and invest in these relationships. So that's why commenting is important, just like messaging. But you can't send haphazard, spammy messages and expect a positive result. And that's why it's critical as we accept, hey, yes, we need to be doing this. I always also tell sellers when I train this that, look, I had to sell myself on the process based on the numbers and the probability and the problem I was trying to solve, that I didn't have these relationships and my audience was out on social. But it was an anomaly. And everybody kept saying, well, Carson, he's out prospecting on LinkedIn, whatever that means. Well, after I closed several multi-million-dollar deals, I never heard that anymore. I heard, can you train me on this? But even today, as I train it, people are still not quite sure how to take those first steps. So I've been there. And I think that's the key, is continue to look at where is your audience, what matters to them, and how can you show up uniquely with perspective, seeking to serve. That's going to give you the best probability of creating that relationship.
Carson, I know we're over time, but you brought up something I wanted to ask about today, and we didn't get to it because you've mentioned this a few times, right? That you've gotten deals that you wouldn't have had by the fact that you're using LinkedIn and social. Do you believe that those deals have come about because of the probability that we've talked about, by just, hey, I'm covering more ground, I'm getting more quality pieces. If I wasn't doing this and I was doing other techniques, my batting average would be lower. And so therefore is that really the correlation at the end of the day?
Without a doubt, Tom. The largest of these deals, I reached out to over 500 people in an organization, complete probability game. It was actually a compete. They weren't even thinking about us. I just happened to get to the table while they happened to be thinking that they needed a solution like what we had, but they were thinking about our competitor. And so it was timely. I got in at the time it mattered. I used it to create a groundswell of relationships across the organization. They had 7 different C-level changes in 2 years, but we were already entrenched. We knew everyone. So as all these moving chairs transpired, they needed us. We added value because we were at the heart of that organization. We knew everything that was going on. We knew all the key initiatives. And that's why that deal happened, was because of relationships. And so it was all about probability.
Yeah. And probability leads to, right, runs, right, or sales that you wouldn't normally get by the fact of doing that. So I think that's a great way to end up. Brandon, any final thoughts before we?
I put this up right now with Floyd's question. Thank you for that. And hi, Floyd. I think this has got to be a topic of one of our episodes, because I get asked this question a lot about, what type of content is going to spur conversations. And, as we're talking about data, we got to take a look at what content we post gets the best engagement, because posting without engagement is just posting. We're talking into an empty room. Posting where we're getting questions or comments or likes or shares, our message is getting wider. And I think it speaks to what Carson was just saying. It's layering of these activities that we get this reputation, call it a personal brand. But with social and the type of content we produce, we almost create our own little omni-channel presence. And all of those are the layers that influence the data, our outcomes. So Floyd, we'll have to take this head on in one of our episodes, because I think that's a great question.
Yeah, well, we talked about that earlier today, Brandon, about content and the right content. And even once you get, somebody who's engaging, how do you keep them engaged as you move along? So we'll have a few shows about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go watch Moneyball again. I don't know about you.
I'm gonna go Ghostbusters. So
And before
I watch every Halloween, so I'm an
okay, so there you go.
Ghostbusters fan. There you go.
and
Well, it
just
is-
Andre just posted something, and we've got to address it because this is the value of social. He said there's a local company he's been trying to work with, and I'll just summarize real quick. Based on his sharing and commenting on posts, they're now asking him for a meeting.
Amazing.
That summarizes the value of social right there. Thanks for that, Andre. Good to see you again.
I think that's a good explanation point on our show today. So next week, our topic is scheduled to be how to sell social selling to your boss. I would say the prerequisite is listen to this show because that's how you're going to go sell it to your boss. But I think we'll be able to expand on this a little bit more and talk about, even some talking points and some things that come up that, well, what about, how do you measure it? And how do you do this? And how do you know? And we'll get into some of that next week when some of those questions come up for sure.
Signed contracts.
That's right.
The hint, go up a level. What matters to them and how can you solve their problems with social selling?
And we'll get into that next week on next episode. So, all right, gentlemen, we all have to run to the movies except for Brandon, who's going to a baseball game. So
our team is not in the playoffs anymore. So best of luck.
Go Dodgers.
Well, I already started today's episode by saying I'm not a baseball fan, but we have friends that had tickets and wanted to go. And who am I to say no? It's the playoffs.
That's true.
So, all right, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.
Thanks all.